professor in the Division of Communication Sciences in the College of Health Sciences at the University of Kentucky. Dr. Page has over 40 years of professional experience as a faculty member and certified speech-language pathologist. Dr. Jane Kleiner is an associate professor in the Division of Communication Sciences, College of Health Sciences at the University of Kentucky. She has 40 years of clinical experience in providing communication services to infants, toddlers, and students with disabilities. I'm going to now turn it over to Dr. Page and Dr. Kleiner. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Page.
Thank you, Walt. I get the joy of being the kickoff on this particular one. Let me tell you just a little bit about how we got started on this. I actually got started looking at this topic in depth last year when I was serving as president of the American Speech Language Hearing Association. And one of the things that ASHA did in preparation for May is Better Hearing and Speech Month was to do a survey of 1,000 parents of children under 8 years old about their attitudes and their experiences with technology with their children. And then I got the information from the survey and wrote several op-ed pieces that appeared in places around the country. And it really got me pushed to think again about something that had been of interest to me before, but I'd sort of put on the back burner. So I'm really thrilled to be here today with people who are interested in talking about this particular topic. We are talking about TOTS and technology. And let me see if I figure out how to move this forward. That's the thing you didn't tell me about. Is it this? Yes, let's talk about, I tried. There, I just didn't do it hard enough. Okay, let's talk about geezers and technology. That would be me, now that we know that I've been doing this for over 40 years. When we talk about technology, we're talking about interactive digital and electronic devices, software, multi-touch tablets, technology-based toys, apps for computers and touchscreens, video games, interactive screen-based media. All of that fits into this category that we'll be talking about today that we call technology. I just don't have. I'm doing something wrong. Am I not pointing it at something? Where are you touching this? Let's do that. That's safer. Yes, I can do that. All right. Sure. So that's what we mean by technology. We also talk about screen time. And screen time can be described as the time that's actually spent viewing some of that technology, TV, video, computer, electronic games, handheld devices, or other visual devices. And there's a lot of talk these days about screen time and toddlers and screen times and kids. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things we know about toddlers and screen time. One of the things that the data I'm going to give you comes from several different surveys. One of the things that we know is that by age 5 months, okay, think about that, 5 months, 40% of infants are engaged in watching some kind of video presentations. So we've got really little boppers there in front of screens paying attention to two-dimensional flat objects doing things. By age 2, approximately 90% of kids are involved with some kind of electronic media. So media is there. You know, that's just the way it is. We see higher media use by kids who come from homes with lower socioeconomic status, by homes where there are single mothers or mothers with less than a high school education. So those families tend to see higher media use than families who are higher SES and have better educated and dual parent kinds of households. Let me talk a little bit about the ASHA survey that I alluded to. There's a whole bunch of data, and if you're interested in it, if you go to the American Speech Language Hearing Association's website and search for a thing called Identify the Signs. It's a campaign that ASHA has trying to educate people about communication disorders. There's access to all of the results of this survey. But here's some summary stuff that comes out of that survey. 24% of 2-year-olds use technology at the dinner table. Okay, that time when is one of the few times when you might be able to have face-to-face kinds of communication between parents and kids. By age 8, that percentage nearly doubles to 45%. So approximately half of our kids, by the time they're 8 years old, are paying attention to technology rather than doing communication with the other people in their home. More than half of parents admit or say they use technology to keep their 0 to 3-year-olds entertained. So it's serving the role of babysitters. Stick them in front of a screen, keep them quiet. Nearly 50% of parents of children age 8 they often rely on technology to prevent behavior problems and tantrums. So technology is a babysitter, technology is a problem solver, and you put the kid in front of technology and settle him down. Here's the scary one, the third bullet. By age 6, 44% of kids would rather play a game on a technology device than read a book or be read to. Now, if you know the importance of reading and the development of language and literacy, that should be a scary statistic to look at. By age 8, a majority of kids would prefer that technology be present when they're spending time with a family member or a friend. So even if you've got somebody over, you've got somebody there that you're spending time with, they want technology to be part of the equation. So technology is there. It is in every place we look. And here I put on this particular, the bottom of this slide, the URL that can get you directly to that data from that particular survey. Okay, so that's what we know about what happens with kids. What do parents think about this? 55% of parents have some concern that misuse of technology might be harming their kids' hearing. So they're aware of the fact that putting headphones on or earbuds in a child's ear could potentially damage hearing. Doesn't mean they're not going to do it, but they know that there's a danger. 52% have concerns also about the impact on their child's speech and language skills. So parents are aware, at least half of them, that we've got some concerns. Now, 2% say they're concerned that technology negatively affects the quality of their conversations with their children. I think that's wrong. I think a number got cut off. I think that's 52%. I'm sure it is. Correct it in your brain. I think I did a transferring issue. 54% say they are concerned that they have fewer conversations with their kids than they would like to because of technology. So people are recognizing that technology is standing in between parents and kids and conversations and interactions. Parents also recognize the potential hearing hazards of those personal audio devices. There's 72% of them who agree that loud noise from technology might lead to hearing loss in their kids. So parents in this particular survey anyway, were pretty aware that technology might be a concern. The majority of them reported in the survey that because of that awareness, they set limits to their kids' technology use. They'd say no more technology than this. Unfortunately, most of them also admitted that they had trouble enforcing or that they didn't enforce those limits. So they knew the limits should be there, might be there, could be important. But when it came time to say, okay, I'm not going to put him in front of the screen or I'm not going to give him an iPad, they were less able to follow up on that particular idea. So we've got kind of a mixed bag. We've got a lot of technology use. We've got parents who know that there are some concerns, who intend to do something about it, but may not always. So we end up with today's connected family, where we may all be sitting in the same room together, but each and every one of us is involved with another piece of technology. And if you converse with somebody in your family, how does it happen? It happens by texting them, even though they're sitting right next to you. Often doesn't happen with direct face-to-face interaction. Now that's kind of an overkill, but it is an area of concern. Okay, so you say, what's the big deal? So we got technology. We're living in the 21st century. Technology is available. We should rejoice and be glad we have access to all this stuff, right? What is the problem with screen time? Well, especially for infants from 0 to 2. There's a lot of evidence and a lot of writing that suggests that technology is a problem for that particular group. If you put a baby in front of an iPad, and if you go to YouTube and you want to look at stuff with babies and iPads, you search for that and you will find picture, tube or video after video after video of babies doing stuff with iPads. They're playing music on iPads, they're pointing to things, they're using an iPad for an object, they're doing all sorts of things with iPads. What's the problem with that? Okay, here's one of the problems. This comes from the American Academy of Pediatrics. Look at this statement and think about what it means. Infants might stare at the bright colors and the motion on the screen. They're interested. It's color, it's moving, it catches their eyes, but their brains are not yet capable of making sense or meaning out of these pictures. They don't have the knowledge of the world that lets them interpret what they're seeing on the screen. And how do you get knowledge of the world? Anybody remember studying Piaget? I know I can't see everybody out there, but I'm looking at these people in the room saying, anybody know the name Jean Piaget? Okay, how do you learn about things? And how do infants learn about things? Through sensory motor contact. They pick up objects, they bang them, they whack them, they mouth them, they do things with them, and they learn how their world works by interacting with that world in a motor and a sensory fashion. And the things that they're interacting with are three-dimensional objects, okay, real objects. And through repeated exposure and experience with those objects, they start to figure out categories, they start to figure out what things are, what things mean, how they work. Then they start learning the words to refer to those things, and they put all this big jumbling, buzzing world together and figure out what it means. Now, if you put a child in front of a screen, he's got that whole jumbling, buzzing world presented to him in two-dimensional format. He can't touch it, he can't manipulate it, he can look at it, but that's about it. And what the psychologists tell us are that children's brains have more trouble making sense of that particular input when they don't yet have the sense about what those things represent in the real world. It takes about 2 years for the baby's brain to develop to the point where screen-based symbols can actually represent their equivalents in the real world. So what our babies are working with in that 0 to 2 year age when they're at a screen is very limited information and something that isn't necessarily connected to real world. Which is why when people have done studies and they compare language enrichment with kids with real life people talking to them versus kids hearing the same thing on a screen, those with real life people talking to them, their language improves. Those who listen to things on the screen, at least in that 0 to 2 years of age, they don't learn the things. They come away pretty much the same. And so the human touch, the human interaction seems to make a difference. So that's one of the reasons we say screen time is a problem. Now, some of the arguments against screen time, I think I might have already started these. Kids learn better from real life experiences than from screen time. Especially, they learn better by moving and doing activities. Unfortunately, the average 12-month-old, look at this, is exposed to about 2 hours of screen time a day. And when they're exposed to screen time, that means they're not typically being exposed at the same time to real life kinds of things. It usually isn't either or, either screen or real life. So those 2 hours we lose in terms of an important, meaningful time for those kids to learn about the world. We also know that active exploration that babies do develops their eye-hand coordination. It develops their visual perceptual skills. It helps develop fine motor skills, and those things can't be developed by looking at a 2D representation of those things. So there's some more arguments. Also, it's critical that kids learn new concepts while they're interacting with actual people and actual objects. It's also critical that they do those motor things that kids need to do: building, climbing, pretending. Take a stick and pretend it's a broom. Take a stick and pretend it's a spoon. You're pretending. You're developing those kinds of cognitive skills. Banging, stacking, manipulating, all of those are three-dimensional sensory experiences. And the screen, at least not yet, the screen is not able to replicate those. Doesn't mean someday we're not going to have technology that can do that. But for right now, our technology can't do that. So here's a statement that comes out of one of the publications of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And I think this is pretty powerful. Specifically, children are programmed to learn from interacting with other people. And if you don't believe it, read the language stuff about how parent-child communication helps kids focus and how it takes advantage of the neural characteristics that kids come into the world with, and all the stuff that people are learning right now with neurology. So kids are programmed to it's a little hard, isn't it, when the screen goes away, to learn from interacting with other people. The dance of facial expressions, the tone of voice, body language between toddler and parent. They say is not only beautiful, it's so complex that researchers have to record these interactions on video, slow them down just to figure out what's going on. Okay. They also say, and here's the important statement, whenever one party in this dance between parent and child, when either one of them is watching TV, the exchange comes to a halt. Okay. And it's really more than TV. It's most screen activities that they might be doing. So they're talking about TV in a broader sense than just regular broadcast television. Okay, this is, I just stuck this in for a little respite here. It comes from ASHA's Identify the Sign campaigns. Says pacifying your child with technology could replace important verbal interactions. And it's just a nice, to me, it was a nice picture of that. Okay, now, there's been debate in the literature for quite a while about how much time is too much screen time. And we will talk about that in a little bit. But before we get to that, I wanted to share with you, if you go through the literature and you say, what can you find out there about the effects of being in front of a screen too often on the impact on child's development? And here are some of the things that have been documented as effects of too much screen time. First of all, their physical effects. Being in front of a screen too much causes babies to have irregular sleep schedules. They have trouble getting to sleep. They have trouble staying asleep. So it disrupts sleep schedules. Any of you who care for infants, you know that's an important thing, okay? It also increases risk of obesity because when you're in front of a screen doing that, you're not out doing those active things, okay? It also lowers your overall physical activity, and it puts you potentially at risk for hearing loss depending on how you get the auditory input and how loud you have that input turned up. So we've got potential physical risks to babies from too much screen time. We've also got a lot of cognitive risks or cognitive impact. Language learning delays. That's a big one. When kids are in front of screens, especially in a passive way, nobody is interacting with them. They're not getting that parent or caregiver input that they need in order to start learning and making sense of their language. Okay, so we see in kids who are exposed to lots of screen time, language learning delays in the areas of vocabulary and some in the areas of their syntax, at least over the short term. You know, there's still a lot of research going on. We don't know how long those delays last, but at least on a short-term basis. We also see delayed reading skills. We see lower math skills. We see lower overall psychological or cognitive abilities. We see poor short-term memory, and we see less time in creative play. So parking your child in front of that screen has some negative, could potentially have negative cognitive effects as well. So that's the second area. Third area, people have documented risks to emotional and social effects. Kids who spend too much time with electronic technology have increased risk of attention problems, of anxiety, of depression. There's a higher likelihood of psychological distress, and the American Association of Pediatrics defines that as emotional problems, conduct issues, and difficulties with peer relationships. So being a screen baby can make it harder for you to be a social baby. They spend less time in social interaction and may sometimes end up relatively socially isolated, and potentially liable to be liable to victimization. So there are a lot of negative emotional outcomes of that screen babysitting as well. Now, here's one that I thought was absolutely stunning. Um, Lots of times, I don't know about you, but I always have liked to sort of keep the TV on in the background. It keeps you company, right? At least certain times of the day. People who keep their screens on as background noise, their TVs on or their screens, um, what people have found, even if they're not watching the television or actively attending to that screen, they see decreased parent-child language. And look at those numbers. Normally, parents speak about 940 words an hour when a toddler is present. That's 940 words that baby gets a chance to hear, to sort of figure out what the words mean and how those words hang together and what the grammar is. They're using that, they're sucking that in to help them figure out their language. Okay. If you put the TV on and leave it in the background, look what happens. That number falls to 170 words an hour, a decrease of 770 words that that baby's not going to hear from the caregiver because that background TV is back there interfering with things. That's huge, I think. I expected it to be some. I never expected that amount of difference. We also know that infants' vocabulary growth is directly related to the amount of time their parents spend speaking with their infant. Okay, so you got to talk to your baby to get them to learn language and vocabulary. You put the TV on and you don't talk to your baby as much. What happens? What would you predict happens? Just exactly what we see. Vocabulary growth goes down. All right. So too much technology could disconnect your child from vital parent interactions. And the technology becomes their interaction and not the parent. And technology doesn't yet, in most cases, have that interactive ability to really enable a child to learn what they need to learn. Okay, the American Association of Pediatrics, back in 99, I believe it was, issued guidelines about use of technology for kids. They've recently redone their guidelines. Their old guidelines were really stringent. Their old guidelines said under age 2, the amount of time a kid should spend with technology is 0. Okay, they said no screen time for kids under 2. Okay. They said between over age 2 up to 1 to 2 hours a day might be all right, but that's it. There's been a lot more things happen since 99. We've learned more. People have come up with maybe some better technology apps that allow you to do some more interesting things. And there's also just the reality that since 1999, technology has become much more omnipresent. So you just can't keep it away totally. So one of the things the American Association of Pediatrics did is they revised their screen time guidelines. They backed off a little bit from this absolute thou shalt not put a baby in front of a screen. Okay. Instead, they're giving you guidelines or precepts that are things that you need to pay attention to when you're thinking about time. There's no strong, firm numbers. So those of you who like somebody to say, here's the number and here's the guideline, you'll be disappointed in this. Those of you who want to use your brain to think about what to do with it will like this. Okay, the one thing they said is, here's their first guideline: media is just another environment. Okay, just like every other environment, media is one, and it can have some positive and it can also have negative effects. So you need to be aware of that and know that. Okay. They also tell you that despite the great influx of media in our lives, parenting has not changed. The role of the parent is still to provide the input, still to provide the structure, still to take care of the child's well-being, regardless of what happens with the media. So now parents have a responsibility, even when they're using media, to use it in a responsible way. And we'll talk about that a little later in the session. Okay. They also, their third one says, role modeling is critical. And what they're saying there is, if you're trying to keep your child from being a screen baby, who just sits passively in front of some kind of electronic media. It doesn't work if you sit on your couch passively in front of electronic media and model that kind of behavior. So the message is to those of us who care for young children, if we want to say to our children, you shouldn't be in front of the screen so much, that means we have to not be in front of the screen so much. So parents need to cut back that use of screen as well to be an appropriate role model for their kids. The next one says, we learn from each other. Okay, duh, that's kind of a given. But it helps us to remember that talk time is critical for language development. If babies don't get talked to and interacted with, they don't learn language. If you've ever seen some of those horror stories about kids who were raised in closets, who when they find them have no language, well, it's not that they didn't have the capability of learning language, they had no input to learn it. And if we are responsible for providing talk time. Passive video presentations don't lead to language learning in infants and young kids. You can put them in front of, at least especially that 0 to 2-year-old, you can put them in front of Sesame Street, you can put them in front of any number of things. If all they do is sit and watch, the data shows us that they're not going to learn the language they need to learn. So, the other piece of that says that the optimal time for media education, if you're going to use media for educational purposes, wait till after the baby reaches at least age 2. Once his brain has formed the ability to realize that what's on the screen is a representation of a reality that he knows, then he can make more sense and he can learn from what's on the screen. So if you're going to be a proponent of educational media, and I think it plays an important role, wait until you got a 2-year-old to start doing that. Keep that little baby face to face with real people. Okay, another precept they have says content matters. The quality of what you are presenting to that baby is more important than time. So both in the talking time that we spend with the baby and in any educational media that we might use, it's the quality of the media. And the next thing says curation helps, meaning it's our responsibility to make sure that we exercise judgment about what kinds of media we put in our kids' hands. We can put trash that really doesn't teach them anything, or we can put stuff that has educational significance, or at least has educational value in the hands of kids when we do put media in their hands. And it's the responsibility of the parents and the caregivers to be the curator of that, not to make the child be the one who decides this is good and this is not good. They also say co-engagement help counts. So if you've got a child that you're putting with media, don't leave them alone. And if you're going to interact with media, do it together and do it in an engaged fashion. So if you're going to play something on the computer, make it some kind of activity or game that the two of you can do together. And while you're doing it, guess what? You talk about what you're doing. You're using language. You're marking that activity. So now it's not just isolated, independent technology use. It is two people having talk time through the vehicle of technology. And that changes the way the impact the technology has. Again, we're still talking about mostly older kids, older than 2, but nonetheless, look for co-engagement. The other thing that's really critical to remember, especially for those littlest boppers, playtime is important. Any of you who interact with kids, you know that. I mean, we all know that play as kids work, but playtime is important. And we're talking about unstructured, unplugged time to just interact with stuff, to do things, to experience the world, especially for those really young children. And I think this is the last. Nope, there's a couple more. The next one says set limits. If you're going for any of your children who use technology, set some reasonable limits for how much screen time you're going to allow a child to have, and when during the day you might do that screen time. That maybe it shouldn't come right before bed. Maybe it shouldn't be more than 30 minutes. Maybe whatever. So set those reasonable limits. And if you believe the ASHA survey, take the next step, and that is try to stick with those limits and actually enforce them. A couple more that get outside of, at least the next one gets outside of our little kids. They started venturing into teenagers, and they say it's okay for teenagers to be online, but you got to know what your teenager is doing and what kinds of things they're doing, but don't try to keep them away from online, because that is a primary social interaction vehicle for teenagers these days. And next one says create tech-free zones. There should be some places in the course of a child's day where it's just a given there's no technology. Mealtime is a prime place. It's if you're sitting with another family member and you're sitting with your technology, you're not interacting. So check those devices at the kitchen door, and keep the kitchen table free. The last one they say, and I really like it, says kids will be kids. Kids are going to make mistakes. They're going to screw up with technology. They're going to do something wrong. They might break. They might drop a device. They might, if they're a teenager, go someplace they shouldn't have gone online. Accept that, deal with it, go on. They say, don't lose it and don't go ballistic. So that's what they say now. So none of this, no technology for 0 to 2, but there are a lot of things to think about and a lot of precepts that we follow. Okay, so if we kind of sum it up, they discourage media use by kids younger than 2, but they don't say no. They encourage you to provide unstructured, unplugged playtime, independent and cooperative. They encourage you to read to your child, okay? And they encourage you to realize that the media use that you give them could have a potential negative effect on kids, so try not to overuse it. All right, what else do we have to say? As a result of especially the stuff that came out of the American Academy of Pediatrics, there were a number of places that started writing screen time policies. Okay, a policy, a written commitment to families that you serve to follow guidelines according to standards of quality for health, safety, and school success. Some of you may work in places where you've got screen time guidelines, I don't know. But here are some examples of some that come from a workshop that was done in the state of Michigan. So these are all Michigan policies. These are not Kentucky policies. I couldn't find Kentucky policies online. But some daycare, childcare centers have established policies like this. And at the time they were considered to meet or exceed best practice. They might feel a little bit stringent, and maybe in light of the revised American Academy guidelines, they are. But here's what they are. Computer time is limited to 2 days a week and 15 minutes per child at this facility. So parents know that at that facility, that's as much screen time as their child will have. Or we do not allow any screen time in our programs under age 5. We allow 1 hour per day of screen time for children age 5 and up in our school age care programs. Another one that seems pretty stringent. And here's the strongest one. We do not have computers, televisions, video games, or anything related to that in our center. So there is no technology in that center. It's a good excuse if you don't have enough money for technology. You just say, nope, can't do that. No, I'm being facetious. But you may see some of those kinds of policies, and it'll be interesting to see if the policies shift a little bit with some of the new guidelines. Okay, now I'm going to shift gears just a minute and provide you some tips for managing tech time in order to prioritize communication. These came out of primarily some of the work that I've been doing with the American Speech Language Hearing Association. So these tips show up in some of the ASHA publications. The first one sounds familiar. Create tech-free times. 1 to 2 opportunities a day when there is no technology. Mealtime is a prime opportunity where we check our devices at the kitchen door. I didn't say it when I saw it on the slide a minute ago. Another prime place to make tech-free is the bedroom. If at all possible, it'd be good to keep computers, iPads, telephones, televisions, anything else that's technology that's screen related out of kids' bedrooms, in part because there is a temptation to use them at bedroom kinds of times, which means you're interacting with that screen right before you're trying to settle down and go to sleep, which can be a problem. And also in part because the caregiving routines around bedtime are a prime opportunity for parent-child verbal communication interaction. And if you interface that computer or that screen in the middle of that interaction, it takes away from that interaction, okay? Or in some cases, absolutely destroys it. So if you can find 2 places to make tech-free, mealtime, kitchen, or dining room, wherever you eat, and bedroom would probably be the 2 primary places. Resist over-reliance on technology to pacify boredom. You know, how many times do you see kids riding around in their minivan in their child seat with that little video player right above their heads with that screen going, nah, 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 nah. And it means parents don't have to talk to the kids. They don't have to worry as much about what they're doing. But listen to what I just said. Parents don't have to talk to their kids. Well, when you're traveling, when you're driving, it's another opportunity to do some interaction. Now, I know there are times when you got to focus on the road and you want to be careful, but there's also a lot of opportunity to talk about what you're seeing and what you're doing and where you're going to be going and do language that you can't do if you're tied to a screen. About half of parents of 0 to 3-year-olds use technology to entertain, and that means we're abdicating our responsibilities when we do that. This is an interesting one. We haven't talked about that. Don't overestimate the value of educational apps. There are a bunch of them out there. And later on, Dr. Kleinert will be talking with you about how you might look at those apps. Just because something is for sale, or even better, free at the App Store someplace, and it says it's educational, you guys know better than that. Don't assume that it is. Kids learn better by talking, conversing, reading, not by listening to some little turtle say, ball, here's a ball, or whatever your educational app is doing, okay? So technology, if you use it, is best used for reinforcement and practice of things the child might already know, not for specific teaching and helping them figure out the regularities. So it doesn't say stay away and never touch technology, but think about what it's doing and what the educational value actually is. Do you feel like I'm preaching? I'm sorry. All right, next one. Make tech use a group activity. So if you're going to use technology, do it together. Play a game together, interact with something together, talk about what you're doing. Make it a conversational or a communication opportunity, not a solitary play activity. Consider carefully whether or not young children really need their own dedicated devices. You know, there's more and more things out there, you know, little iPads with all the protection to make them appropriate for kids, knockdown versions of things, and many of them are designed and marketed just for kids, and people buy their kids their own devices. Well, the disadvantage of that is it's harder to keep it away, and it's harder to control, and it's more likely to lead to solitary tech time. On the other hand, some of the child-friendly technology might have limited content, but all the content is child appropriate, and you won't get into the things that a child shouldn't experience when they get onto more adult technology. And many of the child related things also have extra security built in. So it's easier for you to control what's happening. So you have to decide what's more important to me. And if I do go for the kid related stuff, how am I going to still try to control that use to make sure that it doesn't become the primary interaction that the child has? So think about it. Set daily time limits. If you can program a device to shut off by itself, that's perfect, because sometimes it's really hard to enforce those rules. But if the device turns off, then it's sort of self-enforced. If you can't do that, keep track yourself and try to limit the amount of time a child accesses a device. Okay, be consistent in enforcing any parameters you do set. So if you say, we're not going to use any technology after dinner, for example, then be consistent about it. Majority, as I said, set the limits, but don't stick to them. Where people seem to have the most trouble sticking to those limits is as kids get older and are better at pushing your buttons. You know, 7, 8-year-olds are better to get you to do some, are better able to get you to shift just a little bit than maybe some of the younger kids. But consistency is really important. In a tribute to my audiology friends, always practice safe listening, especially anytime that the device is delivering the sound directly to the ear via earbuds or headphones. Okay, it's bad enough when it's just out in the environment, but if you've got something that's coming directly into your ears, misuse can actually lead to noise-induced hearing loss. And there is an increase in our society in hearing loss in kids who are adolescents because of all of the use, all of the listening to all the music with headphones and listening to it too loud. And we know that even a minor hearing loss has a negative impact on a child's academic performance, On their social interaction, if you can't hear as well, it's harder to be part of the group. On their vocational desires, and on just about every other area of life. So even a little hearing loss is potentially damaging. So we want to keep the volume down on anything we use, and most of people will tell us don't set the volume more than half volume. If you keep it below there, you're probably going to be okay. But also take lots of listening breaks. Take the devices out of your ears, off your ears, and let your ears recover. Okay. So we want to be careful about practicing safe listening. Model the tech habits you want your kids to adopt. I already told you that. Practice what you preach in terms of both tech time and safe listening. So if you're nagging your 4-year-old to take the earphones off because it's been on too long, don't do it with your earphones in your ears. You know, do the same thing. Another important one that I think is critical is learn to recognize the signs of communication disorders. Regardless of technology use, it's good to recognize when you've got a child who's got either speech problems or language production or language comprehension problems, and try to get early treatment so you can either reverse or prevent. Please, please, please do not sit back passively and wait for a child to outgrow the problem. There's a possibility it might be a problem that will be passing, that will be developmentally rectified. But let somebody who knows that area tell you that. Don't just assume they'll outgrow it. And obviously, and I know this is my bias coming in, seek help from a speech language pathologist or an audiologist if you have any concern about a child that you're interacting with in terms of their communication development. Okay. Okay, a few more suggestions for reducing screen time. Some of these you can say we know that. Take it out of the bedroom. Don't allow TV during meals or homework. I'm appalled at how many kids do homework with TV in the background. You know, it's one more distraction and one more access to screen time. Don't let the child eat while watching TV or on the computer. So we already said keep it out of the kitchen, but what about if we just take dinner into the living room and we can be on the computer there, right? No, don't do that. Don't let those two things get intermingled. So eating time is really tech-free time. Don't use TV for background noise. People who say that say it's the radio doesn't have as much negative impact on it because it tends to be melodic and doesn't have conversation. So if you need background, do radio instead of TV. Better yet, don't use noise. Also, this is TV specific. Decide what programs or even what screen things you're going to do ahead of time, and then turn the device off when they're done instead of just keeping it on and shopping for more stuff to watch or to do. Yeah. Suggest other activities instead of screen time. This is old stuff. Board games, puzzles, walking, doing something outdoors. It really is okay to do that. And if one of the problems is decreased physical activity on our kids' part because they're too much in front of technology, let's get them out. And it may be that let's go out together, which gives you more time to talk, more time to interact, and good exercise and activity for both the child and the parent or caregiver. Record, here's a kind of a cool strategy. Record how much time is spent in front of a screen and then make a commitment to spend an equal amount of time being active. So if you're going to sit with your computer for an hour, then you're going to do something active for an hour. You know, at least it doesn't take away the computer time, but it gives you a good thing to go with it. Try using a sleep function. So if you've got a TV on, it turns off automatically. Use a switch control for other devices that might turn off automatically. Challenge your family to go for a week without TV or screens. See what happens. It's amazing when families do that. They find out that they survive and they actually have a good time. Okay. Now, I've been harping about reasons not to use technology. Let's try to be a little bit fair and say there are arguments that people have made for using technology. And we're going to spend a chunk of time today talking about technology and using. So I don't mean to damn technology. I mean to try to say, think about what the effects can be and find a way to use it effectively and where it belongs. People will tell you that if you're careful about what you choose, both in terms of the screen itself and the content, it can help facilitate learning. Interactive ebooks for kids who are old enough to take advantage of them help stimulate reading habits. There are innovative apps out there like Google Goggles or Hidden Park that you can use when you go outside that can add to your outdoor adventure. Parents or caregivers who are savvy use technology to supplement books, to supplement neighborhood activities, to supplement free play, not to replace it. So if you can kind of keep that in mind, especially when we say it's okay to use it for kids over 2, think about how you can use it to supplement and not replace. Okay, but, and here's the thing to remember, this does not appear to be true for kids younger than 2. There is, the people have been able to find no evidence of cognitive benefit for screen use in kids 0 to 2. Okay, so if somebody's trying to peddle you an app for your 5-month-old to help them learn something, at least what we've been able to find in the literature, there's no evidence yet that that stuff is effective for those little kids. Older than 2, yeah. High quality media, you might see improved social skills, improved language skills, better school readiness. So technology could have an important role for those older kids. Okay, and we're not going to look at this because I would like to stop and let. Yeah, I was going to say it'd be a good time for questions before we're going to shift gears and switch from me to Dr. Kleiner. So before I sit down, if anybody has questions either in this room or out in cyberspace out there. Yeah, Melinda.
So just to clarify, in terms of damaging the hearing, wearing earphones or earbuds at the correct volume do not
That's correct.
damage your hearing. It's when you are using those too loud or wrong.
That's correct. Yeah, it's noise-induced hearing loss, and so if you have anything too loud, you'll run the risk of damaging those little sensitive little hair cells and the nerves that help you hear. Yeah. You can, although it's too loud. That's your biggest risk. Do you know other than that, Dr. Kleiner?
We have to look at that.
Yeah. I'm more familiar with too loud. Melinda's question was it okay to wear earbuds or earphones? Period. Was it the volume that made a difference? I'm paraphrasing, and I said yes. That's really the volume, and it may be. We'll need to look up about that length. That's a good question. We'll try to get you an answer. Yeah. Well, do you have some of the others?
We had a question from the chat box, and the question is, what does the research say about reading books on a Kindle or an iPad versus reading print books?
The research I have seen says screens of all kind are not as effective as reading the real object. And I would assume that, I've not seen anybody specifically talk about Kindle, but the assumption is that that's true for Kindle as well. Partly many of the print books, partly I think as children get older, if you're talking about ebooks, there is some effectiveness in using those to get kids engaged in reading and interested in reading. And some of the ebooks that we make, I don't know, are you going to talk about any of those? That have pictures that are appropriate vocabulary for kids would be effective. Not for that 0 to 2 though. Any other questions? We'll take more later. Okay. Dr. Kleiner.
Okay. Well, I'm Jane Kleiner, and I have to say that I've gotten like really hooked on this. And my husband said last night, when you get off that computer, I said, oh no, I'm reading about screen time. So it wasn't very, very good. Speak up. Okay. Okay. Is this better? Is this better?
I can adjust the mic.
Okay.
Quickly. That'll be good.
We could have hearing loss.
Okay, now we've turned the volume up fully. So somebody write in real quick if we're blasting you out. Okay, so Dr. Page has talked a lot about, oh, someone said it's much better. So this is good. Oh, lots of much betters. Okay. So Dr. Page talked to you a lot about the possible negative aspects of screen time and all that kind of thing. But it is what it is. It's out there and it's not going to go away. It's sort of like prohibition didn't do away with liquor, and just say no hasn't really worked. So we need to know what to do and what's good and what's not good. So I'm going to show you just a couple of smaller information from a couple of smaller studies, and then go to some of the very best websites in early childhood where there are tremendous, and this is what I got hooked on last night, tremendous all kinds of references and resources you can look at. So this first slide here has to do with a study that was done where this individual looked at hundreds of apps that are supposed to be for young children that are available. And what he was looking for is, were they designed to meet developmental needs, and what those needs were. So often we just see academic kind of apps. So he was saying, are there apps for social and emotional kinds of things? Are there apps for physical motor skills, that sort of thing? And so and he was interested in finding out, are they interactive or are they pretty much just sit and watch? So his findings are interesting. Oh, okay, so it doesn't want to change. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Oh, that's tricky. I can do that. Okay. See, I just did. Okay. So these are his findings. Over half the apps he evaluated actually were developmentally appropriate, and they had some pretty good content, but they were almost always academic. And our young kids need movement and play and social interaction and social emotional support and all that sort of thing. So there are a lot of nice apps out there, but mostly on academic kinds of things. Interestingly enough, he has 3 instruments to assess apps, which I first started to go dig for until I found these 2 websites that I'll show you in a minute. This is another item that comes out of the literature, and it is very, very strict. This was based on the Canadian Pediatric Society, American Academy of Pediatrics, specialist in early childhood. I think it's from 2010, so you can see it's fairly strict. And as Dr. Page said, no screen time 0 to 2. That's at least that's what the pediatric societies were saying up until just a little while back. But we have to remember that even if we do give it to those kids, like Dr. Page said, it's a very little use. But you can see very stringent guidelines even as the children age. Okay, so that seems pretty harsh. We said it is what it is, and so there is technology, so we need to be able to use it. One of the best sites that I found is NAEYC, which I know you're familiar with, National Association for Education of Young Children. They have all kinds of position papers, all kinds of guidelines, accreditation, every kind of really quality or gold standard kind of information for early childhood. So they make some interesting points. It's their position that technology and interactive media can be learning tools if, and here's their big word, if the use is intentional and developmentally appropriate. Okay, so they're saying, okay, it's there, we can use it, but it must be intentional use and in conjunction with other materials that kids typically have. Okay, and when they talk about technology, they're speaking very broadly. So mobile devices, software, tablets, technology-based toys, apps, video games, anything that we consider electronic media. So the red is what we want. We want use that is intentional. And the intentional has to be in at least 3 ways: the selection of the technology, the actual use of the technology, and the integration of the technology and our understanding of how to evaluate it. This comes from a joint statement from NAEYC and some early childhood specialists. So, okay, I want to take you, and we're going to hope this works. And if it doesn't, you can go home because this is everything I want to talk about on these places. Okay, so where can I go to find guidelines? Okay, and I've given you three of that are just absolutely fantastic. One is NAEYC, which you would expect to be good. The second is 0 to 3, which is actually a journal in early childhood, very well respected journal. And they have lots of information about screen usage, and they have a fantastic frequently asked questions section. So it will help you give families information that's evidence-based and very reasonable and useful. So I want to go to NAEYC first and just show you a little bit of this. And maybe it needs to come up. Let's see. Ah, there we go. Oh, so close. Where to go? There we go. Okay. Okay, it's up. Okay. So one thing I wanted to mention, there were lots of people that said, can we get the PowerPoint? Dr. Page and I have to take out extra junk that's in there. And then, is it not showing?
It is there, but just want someone to share the desktop.
Oh, okay. Oh, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
In this PowerPoint?
It's way down.
This one.
No, I think yeah, that's what we were looking at.
We're seeing everything that's going right now.
Let's just go back.
Go back to the now. You know, things to stop. You bring back up the power.
Okay. Okay. So this is NAEYC's website, and this is the specific section on screen time and digital media. But what I was starting to say was, I see that lots of people are asking for the PowerPoint, and that's not a problem. We just have to take out kind of extra stuff so it's not gigantic. And we'll have to ask Walt, maybe it can be posted, or if we have your email, we can send that. Mainly because it has lots of live links in it, and that'll be much easier for you to just have the PowerPoint and then go to the sites. So this is the first one we're going to visit. And if we scroll down here, you can get the full joint position paper on screen time. But what I want to show you is a couple of these that I like really, really well, and that can be especially helpful to you. So here's children and media tips for parents. Okay. Oh, please. Is it working on it? Okay. Okay, they're telling, oh, there we go. That the Wi-Fi is just a little bit slow here. Well, maybe it's a lot of bit slow. A little more than a little. Okay. Okay. Media tips for families and parents. Some of these Judy has gone through, but I like the idea that media, electronic media is an environment, just like everything else in the child's world. So we're going to acknowledge that, and we're going to use it appropriately. Obviously, you're going to set limits. These are very much like what Dr. Page was saying. The big idea is that we try to get families to use the media together, not just in isolation or as a pacifier for the child. Be a good role model. Obviously, if you're always sitting, oh my gosh, I've got a brother and sister-in-law, and they are retired, and they sit all the freaking day on the computer, and I'm just worried. Maybe they won't have language soon. I don't know. But we can't be using electronic media all the time either. We have to be there, right? It is face to face with the child. And if the child is using it, using that equipment with them. Judy mentioned tech-free zones. This is one I find particularly distressing. Using technology as an emotional pacifier, either to control behavior or to calm the child down when they're upset. Now, in both those instances, those are social emotional issues, okay? We already have a large number of children in the U.S. who are on the autism spectrum, and they're having difficulties already relating sometimes with adults. And then if we just choose to pacify children with electronics, it has nothing to do with true social interaction. We're only increasing the challenges our children could face. So I think that one, if nothing else, if we stress to families, if nothing else, can we just avoid using that media as either an emotional pacifier to calm them down, to get them to do what we want, or to control behavior? I think that's one we really, really need to focus on, and we'll look at some things with that. There's some good apps, but they have to be judged to help kids with homework. And Judy mentioned it's okay for kids to be online. So this is one that's nice that you can pull some tips from. This one I find especially good, and it's how to find educational apps, okay? Common sense media, and I really like that idea. Not that we won't use media, but we'll use it with common sense, okay? And how are we going to judge that media? As much as possible, it needs to stimulate active learning, okay? Just swiping is not really very active. You don't need a whole lot of new neuronal pathways to swipe on the iPad, okay? Kids learn and they improve by active interaction and movement. We know that down at the neural basics, okay? If you are working with the kid, say with a disability, and you facilitate everything he does, he's not building new neural pathways, okay? It must be active movement to build neural pathways. Well, this is the same thing. Our kids are already not doing enough. They don't go outside. We have childhood obesity. We have all those problems. And then on top of this, if we have them even more quiet, so they're not running and playing and building and knocking things down and getting energy and all of that thing, they're not building the new neural pathways for active learning. And so that is another big thing we have to think about, all the way down to the neuro level. This is not just, behavior. This is how the child's brain is actually developing. So if it's going to help, it needs to be active. It needs to engage the child in the learning process. So let's say we say a very young child can have 30 minutes of screen time a day. Well, sticking them in front of the TV for cartoons for 30 minutes is not really what we're talking about. It would be use, if you do decide to do that for 30 minutes a day, of good quality apps that you can find that teach or that encourage movement or encourage learning and that kind of thing. So that's why Judy said a little bit earlier, it isn't the quantity so much. You only get 30 minutes a day. It's the quality. 30 minutes a day in front of the, in front of the cartoons is not doing anything. So we're looking at apps that will encourage learning and meaningful learning and social interaction, okay? Not all apps are educational, obviously. And what they are talking about here, they have some very nice things. And here's one that I like a lot. And it's, this is Screen Sense. And now this takes us to the 0 to 3 website, okay? with Screen Sense. And it does talk a little more specifically about different apps, screen time, all those kinds of things. How to choose an app. Okay. All apps are not equal. The content has to be relatable and developmentally appropriate. So if you take 3 things from NAIYC and 0 to 3, it's that the apps must be developmentally appropriate. They must have content that supports learning and activity and social interaction, okay? And they must be used intentionally. So those are the 3 things that they stress, if we can get that across to families. You want to see yourself as a guide, okay? And so these go through. I'm just showing you some of the sites that have especially nice things in them. I want to go back to 1 or 2 other sites real quick. Okay. Let's put this up and go to this site. Okay. Oh, let's. Okay. Now, okay, here's the questions and answers, which I really, really like. You know, Dr. Page said we can't give you an answer, a specific answer. It has to be this number of minutes. But this page will give you some very specific information. So the first question, what are the recommendations for a child under 24 months of age? Okay. And so you come down in here that if, we'd rather you didn't, but if the family does use the technology, that it's interactive and language rich, okay? That kids are exposed only to very high quality, and that the limit must be less than 90 minutes. I think that's pretty high, but they make an excellent, the same thing that was in some of Dr. Page's information, that kids at this age don't learn from 2D. They learn from 3D, okay? They have to be able to touch it, feel it, chew on it, drool on it, throw it, kick it. That's the way they're going to learn. And they don't get that from the screen. Okay, so here's another one. What exact limits should we have? Okay, well, they're saying that has to be your choice, but there it is again. Quality of the content and the context in which it is used. So 30 minutes with the cartoon show? No. 30 minutes with the mom or the dad or the caregiver or grandma or auntie, whoever, working, playing with the kid, actually interacting, letting him explore it, that could be useful. But remembering for the child under 2, the 3D you need to have 3D, not 2D. Okay. Let's look at another one. Oh, this one I found really interesting. They said, well, if kids shouldn't interact with electronic media, what's the difference? How come you say they can interact with books? Because books aren't books 2D. Well, books really aren't 2D. You open the book, you turn the page, you feel it. Many of our books for babies have all kinds of textures. And the closing remark on this one is, babies chew on books. Okay. Do you want them to chew on the iPad? I don't think so. So it's very clever. It's made so parents will enjoy it. Okay. All kinds of good stuff in here. For older children, what if your child's addicted to the tablet? Obviously, that's a problem. How do you deal with caregivers? You're going to have to limit the caregiver, because if you happen to be a mother or dad that's working and the child's in another setting. Now, if he's in daycare, that's different. But let's say the daycare is a private home or a grandma's house, where perhaps they let the kids have more freedom with the electronic media. That I think that should definitely influence the family's decision. Do we want to keep that child there? The family needs to establish what they think are the best limits. Okay. And so here's usage on this site based on age, which can be very useful to you. How do you approach television? This one I love. What if you have a kid where Square Bob I never understood how to say that. SpongeBob SquarePants. I'm literally reading it. It's so bizarre. Maybe it's appropriate for your kid who's 6, perhaps, but not for your kid who's 2. And they give you some ideas, but they finally end up saying something that families have forgotten to say, which is no, no, you don't watch it. Annie can watch it. She's 6. You don't watch it. And I think that's something that's lost from a lot of parental vocabulary is just no, no, we're not going to do that. Okay. Obviously, you need something else for that child. Okay. Now, go back here. This is actually on the site in a lovely chart. Okay. And I took the information out just so you could read it more easily. But I would highly encourage you. This is off NAEYC site, and it's a lovely chart that has infants and toddlers, a description of the infants and toddlers, and then what they need, and then whether or not technology can meet that. So they're talking about infants and toddlers, and they need to explore, and they have to have human contact and cause and effect. Okay. So what if the family is going to use technology that's just there? Okay. And here's something I think we want to think about. You already know the data on the culture of what used to be called the culture of poverty. We talk about low socioeconomic levels. Okay, won't use that word anymore. And basically the idea being that we already know the number of words that perhaps middle class families do when their kids have language and progress maybe a little better. And that there's really a dearth of language and word usage, less vocabulary, less variety in homes where there's a lower socioeconomic level. Okay, it has nothing to do with race or gender or any of those kinds of things, background or the language that's used in the home. Okay, it's just kind of a lack of stimulation of those kids. Okay, so this might be the family, especially if we got very, very young parents. Okay, that's another population where the same kinds of things happen. Very, very young parents. So we're not getting new vocabulary. We're not getting modeling. That might be the family that does let the kid use the telephone as a pacifier or an app on there as a pacifier. Okay. One of the things that I've thought about that I think we can, rather than saying you shouldn't do that. Okay. I mean, it's not like they're going to listen to you just because you say you shouldn't do that. Even if you're the daycare director, even if you're the head of the agency that's working with this family and home visitors and everything else. Probably the better idea is to help them get the idea of just using it with the child. Okay. A really fun thing. I worked in Head Start, daycares, home visiting, lots of that kind of thing. And, the families that I worked with didn't have the computer and the printer and everything else to make these lovely storybooks that we're going to make with all our media. But probably the Head Start has some iPads or iPods, or they've got cameras, and they probably have a printer. So, and usually when you have the parents in for meetings, they're going to be pretty short meetings. Okay, it's not like you're going to bring them in and do a 2-hour lecture. I don't think they want to listen to Dr. Page and me. It's just not going to make it. Okay, but what would be really cool and fun if they have a phone, they bring it. If they have an iPad, but if not, you have some there. Okay, and so you take lots and lots of pictures with the parents that night and help them arrange how they would like it in a book. And then as a surprise to the kids, you print it out and they've got a book to show their friends who they are and who their families are at school, and they take it home. And there's a book that maybe the family could really use with the child. Okay. And then by the same token, you do the same thing with the kids and send it home as, a present for Christmas or a present for whatever. So we're actually using the technology. We're saying, yeah, that family has a phone, so let's use that phone for something that can be useful rather than just pacifying the child. We're avoiding then the passive screen time, okay, which is what we don't want. And then trying to pull in those families and parents and get their instead of telling them they're wrong in what they're doing, get them to use it in a way that can be beneficial both to themselves and to the children. This particular suggestion here is my favorite in everything I looked up. They said birth to 2, the kids are going to see people using this stuff all the time. Get toy ones, okay? Toy phones, toy iPads that don't work, toy computers that have buttons that push and different people pop up when you push them. And they can play with that because it's 3D, it's creative, it's fun. You know, the most fun you ever have is when your kid's 11 or 12 months old and he picks up the phone and he sounds just like you, but he's not saying anything. Okay, I mean, he sounds just like his daddy. Same thing. He's going to look just like daddy on his pretend iPad or his pretend computer or his pretend iPhone, which I thought was such a wonderful idea because that's how our kids grew up. And we don't want to deny that those things exist, but we don't want our little bitty ones using them. Let's give them pretend ones. So we reinforce play, imagination, language, jargon, babbling, all that kind of good stuff. Okay, let's talk about preschoolers. What do they have to do? They create. Okay, they create. It's when they learn to draw and build and sing and dance, and they're just goofy as can be, and it's also wonderful. Okay, so what can you do with that? Okay, well, they can freely explore the screens. That sounds fine. One thing I like that they suggest is not just the iPad and the iPhone. Technology, remember, still does include those computers. And so they I think it's a lot more constructive that they also get time to mess with the mouse and the keyboards and all that kind of stuff that they're going to be using. Gosh, my kid was in 3rd grade when I went back for a doctorate. I'd never seen a PowerPoint. I had to make a PowerPoint for a class. I'm like, my God, what is a PowerPoint? My kid in 3rd grade, she was 8, taught me to do PowerPoint. Okay, so the time's coming, they're going to need to be able to use it. It's not a bad thing. So let's have that kind of exploration too. This one, though, is the one I love. So what do they need to do? They build, they create, and then we use the technology for them to take pictures of it and take it home to show mom and dad what you did. Take videotapes of their plays. Okay, so this is creative. We're going to make up a play about such and such. The kids are all going to participate. We'll take a video of it and we can send those home. So easy. Okay, and the cool thing about it is they're still doing all the things children should do, but we're not denying the existence of technology. We're actually using it to make life more fun, you know? So it'd be really cool to take home and show mom your tape of your play at school and ask mom to take pictures of all the drawings and send those back and share them with all your friends that you do at home. Okay. A few more things they talk about: digital storytelling. This one I absolutely love too, and I'm going to go up just a space here because this is where it is so cool. If you're working in daycare, you undoubtedly have children who speak a second language, or else you live on the moon. Okay, there's a big one on UK's, not really part of UK, but on UK's campus, and so they have many children who speak some dialect of Asian language or Arabic language, and of course lots of folks who have Spanish and Russian. So what do we know about those kids? Well, in the literature, we know that they go through stages learning a second language, okay? And there's 2 things you have to watch for. One is they become almost silent when they're at preschool or daycare, okay? Because they're like trying to figure this out. This is really weird, okay? And other kids may get the idea that they don't talk, okay? So that's a stage that is very natural. Then they begin to learn the new language. They're enjoying the new language. And another danger time is that they sometimes then at home won't use their native language or their first language. Well, that can be devastating. You don't want your teenager not to be able to understand you and have good, deep conversation in your primary language, okay? So unless we are watching for these stages and know how to deal with them, all kinds of things can erupt. So this is just a fantastic I just love this little scenario. It's on the NAYC site. So this little boy, and that's exactly what was happening. He happened to be Chinese. He wasn't talking at all. The other kids didn't know exactly what he understood. So the teacher just sent home an iPad and asked mom or dad or whoever to make whole lots of pictures of the family. They put them in an electronic book and a hard copy book too. And he came back, and with all his friends gathered around, he would tell the stories about his family. And he'd use his Chinese dialect and the English dialect, and the kids picked up on that. And they learned about him, they learned about his family. He didn't feel isolated from them, okay? And the other kids did similar kinds of things. Simple use of technology that really addresses some of the major things that happen when your child is learning that second language in a new situation. Another one, which I think is a really simple one, is to have an iPad kind of set up and use one of the apps where you can bring up a picture. So bring up a picture of Cookie, and it speaks it, and then you choose the voice, the language it's going to speak in. So you speak it in Spanish and you speak it in English. So the kids are talking to so-and-so and the kid doesn't have the word, or maybe the other kids should try to speak a little Spanish. Yes. And so they go and look up the word and use the Spanish word rather than that child always having to say it in English. Okay, so now both sets of kids are learning in the typical preschool setting. And I think those can be tremendously useful. So the kind of creative usage of the apps can be tremendously important. Okay, so we've talked a lot about, we've been talking pretty much about typically developing kids, but in many of our preschools, and many of our preschools are inclusive. Our schools are often inclusive, and certainly if you're working in early intervention, you're working with kids with disabilities. So what about apps and technology with kids with disabilities? Well, there's endless numbers of apps. You're going to have to be aware. You're going to have to really explore them. But there's some pretty decent apps for communication, language, literacy, and academics that can be used for kids with and without disabilities. So how do you find them? Where are they? Here's just a few considerations. And if you use technology at all, you already know this. Obviously, the iPad is larger. It has a bigger screen, a bigger access for kids with physical disabilities. iPod is smaller, but it's portable. Okay, we recommend for lots of our kids that we work with who have autism and they're using some augmentative kind of communication, their motor skills are okay. Okay, they're not sitting in one place all the time. So instead of the iPad, which is so big and you're carrying around, you're going to drop the thing. We can put an iPod or an iPhone in our pocket with the same app, and now they're moving around. They're in all different places. Androids, there are lots of good apps. People only talk about the technology. Lots of good stuff for Androids. You just are going to check what fits. What are the rules? And these are rules that we use with our kids who have disabilities. The device is not a toy. If you're going to use it for communication, the device is not a toy. We use it with respect. It's okay for your friends to use it too. We want your friends to use it too. Then everyone is understanding communication. If it's for academics, we probably want to limit the time with it so that he gets a variety of different ways to interact with his friends. Okay, so just like ASHA talks about, there'll be tech time and talk time. I want to show you a couple of that are just really, really wonderful for very young kids. Very, very young kids, 9 months old. And Dr. Page just told you not to do this, but I'm going to tell you to do this. Okay. Our little bitties need to learn tool use and all that kind of stuff. But we use those things that pop up and our kids can't do it. And then when the thing pops up and then they go into a startle and they're crying and it's like, why did I do that? Okay, I mean, it taught tool use, but I've just gotten him so upset he can't do it. I want to show you an absolutely fantastic site, and then we'll come back to a couple of these other things, but that are extremely useful. Whoops, where'd we go? Oh, where is she? Well, we'll just go back. Sorry, we'll do it here. Okay, this is Janice Light's website. She works with kids with disabilities and lots with technology. It's another one, if you're in first steps or early intervention, you must know this site. It is wonderful. All kinds of video, all kinds of suggestions, ways to work with kids. But this is one of my totally favorite ones, okay? So just watch it and enjoy it and look at what technology can offer. She's about 8 or 9 months old, I think. Look at that little hand. Okay, you get the idea. That we can use the technology even, and we probably ought to turn her off though. Go away, lady, whoever you are. We don't want to see you anymore. Go, okay. Oh, okay. Sorry, that's my lack of technology. Okay. Okay. So the idea being obviously that we can use the technology and what they're doing there is following every rule that was suggested. It's interactive. There are a lot of people there. What happened with it is she looked away from the technology to the adult, to the mother, to her sister. Everybody's using it. Everybody's having a good time. It's fun. It's inventive. Okay. Now, that system she was using is relatively expensive. But I want to show you what you can do with an app. Okay. Now, these are on the phone because I was making videos, but so they would be much larger on iPad. But here's the same idea. Okay. Now, what the baby did was touch the picture anywhere and something spoke. Okay. And it made a noise and all that kind of stuff. Here's one that I think it's $1, might be $1.99. And that technology, I'll take you back actually. That technology is called visual scene display. The really wonderful part about it is you are designing the whole little system yourself. So you take a picture of the bathroom and anywhere the kid touches, it says what you say because you're putting in hot spots. Okay. What a cool way to teach vocabulary. You want to be with the kid, but it's exactly like babbling. Okay. Babies babble sort of indiscriminately. And we go, oh, you said mama, you said bottle, you said that. Oh, they aren't saying anything really. There's babbling. But this does the same thing. Anything they hit means something. Okay. It's kind of motor babbling, if you will. So you can make one just as good. Okay, so you could put anything on here. This is just a little one. You could do their bedroom and make it say light and make it say mama and make it say night night wherever he happens to hit. $1.99. Okay. The device that you saw on the tape, several hundred. Okay. There are all kinds of really, really inexpensive communication devices. I'll show you just a few. Some of them are absolutely free. This takes us to the point that says, well, we can't start him on that stuff because it's too expensive. Wrong. We can't start him on that stuff because he's not ready. Wrong. We can start him on all of it because we can find inexpensive, let him use it as if he's babbling. There are no prerequisites, and the technology has made that happen. So here's the good side of everything that's happened, right down to teeny babies. This is just a kind of a very inexpensive little communication system that you can get from the App Store. And there's loads of these online. There's ICOM, there's a Lexicom. This one's pretty cool because it has boards for all different kinds of topics. So that belies, it's too expensive? No. He's not ready for it? No. I don't have the equipment? No. I don't have the time to design it? No, because it's already there. It may not be perfect, but it's out there, okay? So just that there are some positive things that we can look at. What about kids with and without disabilities that you want to stimulate their language, their communication, we want to get them moving, talking, all that kind of fun stuff. Okay, you know that you're going to analyze the apps from the different sites that you've looked at. You know that you're going to personalize it as much as you can, okay? And then taking those, you can model and use them. So what is out there? Now, they're very expensive things, which I'm actually going to skip because you wouldn't pick those unless you really were working with an SLP and all that kind of thing. But this is a lovely, lovely site here. It's called App Wheels. And I'm going to show you a piece and then go to the actual site also. What they have, and this doesn't have to be for kids with disabilities, they have some lovely sections on all the different kinds of things that language does, okay? So if we think about morphology, what's morphology? Well, it's the little sound that changes the word. So there's run and runs, and there's cup and cups, okay? It's that. Here's some cool little, very inexpensive apps, okay? And these are all in there for you. You can just go in and find them that work on both receptive and expressive in terms of grammar and very specifically morphology. How cool is that? Irregular verbs, regular verbs, all kinds of cool stuff. Syntax, and that's grammar, essentially, how I put my words together. Okay, what are those rules? Well, this little app, here's $9.99, $5.99, $5.99. These kind of cool ones that'd be fun to play with. Remember we talked about it's the quality of the app, not the quantity. Works on both. And the semantics is meaning, so it's vocabulary and what I mean when I say things. Categories. Pragmatics, social interaction. Remember, that very first thing I said was that the apps work a lot of academics, but very little social emotional and social learning and social language. Those are out there, and you can find them. And this site is very cool because it has all these separated for you, okay? Now, let's say you're interested in literacy. Actually, I'm going to scoot up just a second. No, I think we'll go back to that one site. Do that right now. Okay, I'm going to take you to the app wheel, okay? Now, this is where I found those preset listings of things that you can use, apps you can use with different parts of language, okay? So that's where I found that one, and you can download it very easily right here. But the coolest thing on earth, oh my God, I am in love. This is called the App Wheel, and it happens to be for kids with autism, okay? Now, what they do, and you can follow it, they have colored the different skills. So maybe you think your child needs a lot of work on social communication, okay? So that's pink. So what we're going to do is on the app wheel, find the apps that emphasize the social communication, okay? Here's another one. And it also, oh my goodness, now you can tell why I'm in love. This is middle school, okay? For older kids, taxonomy of learning, all kinds of really cool stuff. And you don't have to dig out the app. They've already got it on here, okay? And it's all color-coded. So there's some really wonderful places out there that you can use. Okay. So we'll click through these because we just looked at them. Okay, how about literacy? Well, you know, there's 18 zillion literacy apps. Lots are free, okay? But I like to look at ones that are interactive. Remember, that's what Dr. Page said. So we're looking for ones that make stories, that tell stories, that allow the kid to produce his own stories, okay? Because what we're asking parents to do is do this kind of thing with your child, okay? If you work in special ed at all, you're familiar with social stories. And it does take time to put them together and all that kind of thing. There's this app that we recommend to people all the time where it's got the template for you. And you can make it the social story as long and short as you want. You just enter your pictures and a little bit of your dialogue. And then there's loads on the web that are already made, okay, for transition. My child doesn't like to stop playing outside and come in. You can find it already. So there is a lot to be said for the technology, okay? The biggest question people have is where do I find the best app? Could be for in any of these areas. And those you pretty much can look for search engines with those. Here are some of the ones that we sometimes use to find, and this will be in the PowerPoint. So I wouldn't, write these down right now. You'll be able to get them. But there are also sites for locating apps. Okay, so not I need a literacy app, but a site that's for locating quality apps. And I think that's the better site, okay, rather than putting in literacy and going through 800 yourself. So here's one for autism. Here's one that targets communication and helps you locate, okay? They evaluate the apps, which is very, very helpful. That's some of Jonna's light stuff again. Remember, the Android may not accept the same thing. So I also put in here lots of sites for you to go to Android. Those instruments are usually less expensive, more plentiful. You might be able to have 5 of those to 2 iPads, okay? So then we have to be able to have the apps and the sites to find how to fill those. What can we find of quality that go on those Android? Here's your autism wheel again, and that's the specific site to go to it. I don't know if anybody uses Notability, but it is God's gift to humanity for kids with physical disabilities who are cognitively doing well. It's all kinds of adaptions for typing, for using your finger to write, for coloring, for taking notes in class, all kinds of really, really cool stuff. You can scan in the kids' Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday work for morning work time for the little kid in first grade. And then you don't have to sit with him and work through all of it. It's on his iPad in Notability, and he can just use his finger to X the one that doesn't belong or find all the B's, okay? You can use this app to do that. So if you work with kids with physical disabilities in the school, Notability is one of the best around. So what are you going to do? Obviously, if you have to rate them yourself, you're going to look at the screenshots. You're going to check the date. Okay, if it's old, obviously you probably don't want it. Read the description, try the links, check the ratings. I have so many times started to purchase something and then read the feedback from users and said, oops, no, we don't want this one. That's all there. Close to 30% in iTunes of apps are free. More than half of Android apps are free. Okay, so they're very, very affordable. How can I find more? If you're looking for kids with mild language problems or kids with disabilities, whatever, you can go to the American Speech and Hearing Association, Geek Speech, which I love dearly, made by speech pathologists because we are primarily geeks. So Geek Speech. And so those are very useful. So I didn't give you lots of lists. I wanted to give you where you can go to find what you're looking for. And so we will clean up the PowerPoint and then ask Walt either to post it so you can download it or email it if we have your emails. Okay, so we're kind of on the mark. We got time for questions or comments. We have just been talking at you all. And I know there's people out there who have huge expertise in this kind of thing. So suggestions, if you can talk about what you do or what you found or what you see that parents like, or how do you suggest to parents that they not just use that phone as that app as a pacifier. So we have time and would really love to hear what you all are doing too. And that anybody in here too, and I can just repeat the question or the comment. Oh, well, please have comments like, you found this great resource and we all need to know it. Things like that. You guys know a lot more than we do because you're out there doing it all the time. Please feel free. Judy says, is everybody alive? Have we killed you with our droning?
We'll get to the family afternoon.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, folks are typing in. Wonderful. Oh, oh, wow. I just saw one that said notability is also really good for kids with low vision. Yeah, that's tremendous. And you know what? We didn't talk about vision. If there are some really good sites or suggestions from anybody about that we could add to the PowerPoint, you could maybe send us and we'll add for vision because that's huge. Okay, one is called wonderbaby.org. Okay, could you kind of write those down so we can add them? Wonderbaby.org was one suggestion. Oh, okay, it's from Perkins School for the Blind. Okay. Fantastic.
I'll just say that one thing that I'm really interested in when I look at apps, I'm a systematic instruction person.
Okay.
So when I look at apps, oftentimes you don't realize it, but when you start to evaluate apps, you can start to see, oh, they really incorporate some systematic instructional principles. And so I try to select those apps that incorporate those kind of principles. Like there's one called Spell a Word, and it teaches spelling, but they teach it in a model, lead, test format. So first they come up with a model. Here's how you spell, shop, S-H-O-P. Now let's spell shop together. And so then they lead, and then they say, now you spell shop. So it's a very systematic instructional trials are embedded within the existing app. So if we can find those that already incorporate principles that we know work very well in instruction, then we can say, oh, well, then maybe that can really bump up our instructional time. We may not be able to spend as much time one-to-one with kids as we like to, but if we have a really high-quality instructional app, they can be working on that while you're over here working on something else.
Okay, I'm going to try to repeat this. Dr. Melinda Alt is here, and she was saying that she looks, when she evaluates apps, she's looking to see if they have a structure in terms of, or using good structured systematic instruction. Okay, systematic instruction. She's giving an example, one called Spell a Word, okay, and it uses model, lead, test. Okay, so and she's saying, and I'll explain that in a second, but she's saying it's such a good augment. We can work with kids one-to-one, but a lot of times we see kids not very engaged while the teacher's working with someone else. So this would be a great one to follow up. It's already set up in systematic instruction. So, the first word comes up, and the individual in the app models says, this is the word shop, S-H-O-P, shop. Then the individual leads, model lead, and he says, let's do it together. And the kid does it with them. He either types it in or says it or whatever. And then what is the last piece? Model lead, test. Okay, and then he says, now can you do it? And so the child then responds however the app accepts. The good part about it is you're not having to formulate all that instruction. The kid can do it somewhat on his own if he's able, and it's done in good systematic instruction. So the approach is a quality approach. That sounds like good. It's called Spell a Word, that particular one.
There are also apps where you can track how much you use their iPhone or iOS device for a very political basis. So if you're a parent,
That was Christina Espinoza, who's with the Human Development Institute, and she's a technology specialist. And she said there are also simple apps you can put on that tell you how long your child has been on the electronic device, and that lets you gauge. So it's a good way to monitor yourself or monitor the child. Okay. 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 And Dave, who's also with Human Development, was saying that you can also set the app so that it just shuts off at a certain point where there's too much usage. And in his words, if the child's being obstinate, I like that. It just goes away.
limiting the technology and the interactiveness and with the iBoard, the kids can't go touch it. They're all sitting there looking at it here. But we're using it for things like doing songs and things like that. Do you think it's better to just do it with a CD player? I mean, I've noticed a lot of kids do better if that for some reason they've got their buddy with the people instead of just me dancing. But do you think that that's an okay use of technology with them, or?
We have a question from an individual who is a preschool teacher in an inclusive setting, and she uses an iBoard, and it's large and it projects, right? Okay, so you could do a song, and then also there's the people up there dancing, and the words are up there. And she's saying, would it be better if it were just a CD? And I think that's it depends on how much you use it. If you're in an inclusive setting, though, what you want is universal design, and that's what the iBoard is. So the kid that needs really enlarged for vision, the kid who doesn't attend unless things are bright and moving, it's universal design. You're not using it all day long. You're going to use it, quality over quantity. But if it's attracting kids, and she said in her experience, her students are actually doing better, then personally, and Dr. Page, you need your opinion, but personally, I say that I think that's a cool usage because that's the thing we haven't even mentioned, is that technology has allowed us to now have universal design, which then allows us to have kids with and without disabilities together, and that's really what we want. Dr. Page?
What I was going to say about that is that it's a good use because it's, for one, it's interactive, and also because the dancing in particular, if we're talking about technology keeping you stable and not moving, that does just the opposite. So some of the problems that we have with technology, that really overcomes.
Yeah, I don't know if you could hear that, but Dr. Page was saying another plus is that this allows the kids to see it, but maybe they want to imitate the children dancing. And so there it is. It's the active, it's the neural connections, and that's really what we want. So it sounds like a really, really cool use of technology. Walt.
We had a comment from the chat box, one of the participants online. It says, thank you for emphasizing the importance of parent interaction. It seems that with so many changes and new findings in research, parents and teachers can't keep up, but quality interaction is a constant.
And I'm going to repeat what Walt said. This is a comment from the chat box from one of our participants. They were excited to hear that there was an emphasis on parent interaction and active parent input, and mentioned that while things are changing in education and technology and everything, that need for parent interaction that remains a constant. And Judy just said amen. Okay. Oh, are we good? We have one more. Mm. Yeah, I'm gonna repeat the comment that Dave just gave us from Stephanie Whaley, that her opinion on the CD versus the iBoard would be, she would go with the iBoard because all the kids are listening to it at the same time. They're getting to be interactive. The focus is not just on the little one that we're trying to teach, and in case they have they're sensitive or have social emotional issues, all the kids are watching and their focus is on the screen, not necessarily on the child who is working on participating. Okay, well, it's gonna close out. We thank you all so much for coming, and please feel free to send us, if you think of something later, comments that before we send the PowerPoint out, that we can add suggestions that you make.
I'd like to thank Dr. Page and Dr. Kleinert for a wonderful presentation today. Thank you so much. And we have recorded this presentation, so we will make it public, and I'll let you send out an email and let you know about where you can reach that. We also have a evaluation, hopefully we'd like you to fill out, which will improve our seminars. I'll send that out immediately after this meeting, the link to that evaluation online. Thank you for your attendance today. Have a great weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Oh, is it Chicago? She's in Chicago.